The royal family are constantly featured in the media for their royal duties and their personal lives. Millions around the world are captivated by their every move. How does the king feel about this current news story? What did the Princess of Wales wear to that appearance? But lying beneath the headlines about royal engagements and state affairs, there's a whole other thread of stories of the more paranormal kind. If the accounts are to be believed, royals in the past are super into the paranormal. Some have made contact with the dead through secret séances. Others encountered a superstitious sailor's worst nightmare while out at sea. And maybe, just maybe, they've even been involved in a super secret government UFO program? Yeah, we're going to be chatting about some weird things this week. It all started during the research for last week's episode, where it turns out pretty much all of the royal residences are haunted in some capacity or another. Big, old buildings with hundreds of years of history, and there's talk about ghosts. Shock, am I right? But what was surprising was just how many stories there were of actual members of the royal family allegedly witnessing these ghosts. And so if you haven't seen that episode and you want to know exactly what happened to make our King of England allegedly cry out, "Oh heck," before darting out of Sandringham Library, go and watch that one after this. But I don't know about you, but to me, it was quite unexpected that there were so many ghost stories that potentially happened to the royal family. I guess I just hadn't really thought about it before, but you don't associate them with ghosts or the paranormal or anything like that, or at least I don't. When in reality, the monarchy has had a long history of being interested in this more supernatural side of things. I mean, even way back in the day, Queen Elizabeth I, she had a guy called John Dee in her court who would visit her to show her the results of his experiments, and would even apparently write her coded letters signed 007, for your eyes only. Potentially the inspiration behind James Bond's code number, some say. And John Dee, he was an integral part of the court. The Queen knew him as the conjurer, but he was a mathematician, astrologist, and alchemist, hugely influential in his time. But as part of his constant quest for knowledge, eventually John Dee turned to attempting to communicate with the angels, taking part in séances with his mate, an occultist called Edward Kelly, who I should point out was accused of forgery at one point, so questionable integrity, mayhaps? And that's not even getting into the wife swapping that him and John Dee actually went through with, because Edward Kelly had told John that that's what the angels had wanted them to do. Sure. But the point I'm trying to get at here was that this interest in spiritualism and other realms in one form or another has been around the monarchy for centuries. Coming a bit further forward in time to the reign of Queen Victoria, it's pretty widely known that the poor woman was absolutely devastated when she lost her husband, Prince Albert, when he died of typhoid fever on the 14th of December 1861. And so, once again, the monarchy turned to the paranormal for answers. Only this time, instead of just being a quest for knowledge, like John Dee and the angel séances had been, Queen Victoria just desperately wanted to communicate with her husband just one more time. She was already interested in this realm, having apparently attended séances together with Prince Albert while he was still alive, way back as early as 1846, when apparently an 11-year-old clairvoyant called Georgiana Eagle impressed Queen Victoria and Prince Albert so much that the Queen presented her with a gold pocket watch. The watch was referred to as Vicky's ticker, and it eventually found its way into the College of Psychic Studies. Just going off on a bit of a tangent here, but the watch was actually nicked in 1962 and was only found when a jeweller in Manchester died, and his relatives were going through his things and found it, having no idea of the story behind it. And so now I believe it is back home at the College of Psychic Studies, but I just thought that was interesting. But going back to Queen Victoria, after her husband had passed away, she allegedly received messages from Albert from beyond the grave, when a 13-year-old medium called Robert Lees shared information with her that would have been impossible for him to know. I'm guessing pet names and I know what side of the bed you sleep on kind of things, maybe? But from there, Buckingham Palace became the location of multiple séances, involving different mediums and psychics, where they would do everything from table tipping, where you'd sit with your hands on the table and wait for it to rotate or move in response to the alphabet alphabet being said out loud, or things like automatic writing, where you'd get a spirit to channel through you and write something without you consciously doing it, like all of those sorts of things. Although seances were growing in popularity throughout society during the Victorian era, that trend of royals being involved in these sessions to contact the dead seemed to continue beyond that, as there's another story about a seance being held, this time in 1953. And the story comes from a medium called Lillian Bailey, who apparently was approached by a woman asking if she'd be up for conducting a seance for what was described as a group of VIPs. She agreed, and so when the time came, she was asked to put a blindfold on and get into a waiting limousine. Just sounds super sketch to me, but it all worked out for her, I guess. When she reached the destination, Lillian was directed into a room where she sat down, still blindfolded, and then she started hearing people sitting down around her before she started the seance. And the way that Lillian worked was that she would go into this deep trance and channel the spirit of whoever they were trying to communicate with that way, so Lillian wouldn't really be present while it was all going on. I know, if you're not really into mediumship and all of that, this can totally seem like a bit of a reach, which I 100% understand, but this is just the story, I'm just telling you as it is. Apparently, once the seance was over and Lillian came out of the trance, she was able to take the blindfold off to find that she was sitting in a really nice drawing room in a house in Kensington. And she was surrounded by Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, the Queen Mother, Princess Margaret, and the Queen's cousins, Princess Alexandra and Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent. They'd been attempting to contact King George VI, who had obviously passed away the year before in 1952. And apparently the Queen Mother had been so impressed by the trance and the supposed messages that had come through from her late husband that she gifted Lillian with a gold brooch and called on her services multiple times after that. I can't talk about royal seances and mediums without mentioning Harry. I know a lot of you have very strong feelings on him and all of the drama, but I'm gonna talk about his experience, okay? He is the son of the current king, he is technically part of the royal family, whether he's part of the firm or not. And so this information comes from his book Spare, but it mentioned that him and his brother Prince William went out to lay flowers on their mum, Princess Diana's grave in 2017 for the 20th anniversary of her death. William apparently mentioned to Harry that it felt like Diana was still around them, and especially in that moment, they could feel like their mum was still there with them. Which, even from a realistic point of view, Diana is buried at Althorpe House on an island within the lake on the estate's grounds. The only way to get to her resting place is by boat, I think. The only reason to go over there is for Diana, so of course your mind is going to be on her, especially William and Harry. But then Harry, he may have had another experience in a seance that proves, at least to him, that his mom is definitely still there looking over him and his family. He mentioned in his book that there was this woman who claimed to have powers, which obviously you're going to raise your eyebrow at this. But apparently this woman came very highly recommended and a lot of his mates thought that she was the real deal, so okay, go on then. As they sat down to start this seance, Harry thought to himself that he could feel this energy all around him, and the woman said, okay, Diana is here right now. She went on to say that Diana knows that Harry has been struggling, but just basically hang on in there, everything will be okay, it will all work out. Diana then apparently said that she is incredibly proud of Harry and how he's living the life that she wanted for him. Obviously, these are big statements, they're going to be whirling around in your head, but surely it could all just be lip service, right? Maybe just telling Harry what he wants to hear or what this woman feels like he needs to hear in the moment. But then this woman mentions the ornament, a Christmas ornament, and goes on to tell a story that seems highly unlikely that she would have known. Because on Christmas Eve 2020, while they weren't with the rest of the family at Sandringham, Harry and Meghan were opening their presents on Christmas Eve rather than Christmas Day, and Meghan had gifted Harry with a Christmas ornament that had his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II's face on it. Lovely, nice thoughtful gift. And so Harry just stood up and hung it on the tree. Like, there's no point putting it away until next Christmas, get it up on the tree now. And that was that for a bit, until Archie, just toddlers being toddlers, he was moving about and knocked the tree, which caused this ornament to fall off and smash. Archie then, bless him, he grabbed a spray bottle with water in it and was spraying the broken pieces, trying in his own little way to fix the ornament. And that was apparently the incident that this supposed woman with powers was referring to. She said that Diana had been there in that moment and that she'd had a little bit of a giggle over it, so there you go. But then, aside from ghosts and trying to contact the dead, there was a really interesting like potentially paranormal story from King George V, so Queen Elizabeth's granddad, King Charles's great-granddad. Because back in 1881, two of Queen Victoria's grandsons, Prince George, who would later become King George V, and his older brother, Prince Albert Victor, they were on board the HMS Bacchante, and they were doing this 3-year cruise with the Navy. And I know calling it a cruise sounds like super relaxing and everything, but it's with the Navy and it was for like training and things like that, so it was not sun loungers and margaritas. But on the 11th of July 1881, at about 4 a.m, Prince George was said to have seen a strange phantom ship glowing red. And he wasn't the only one. It was recorded that another 12 men also saw this eerie ship, as well as 2 other ships that were in the vicinity. They saw this red glowing light in the ocean. And so sailors at the time and people hearing this story, they've become adamant that it was an encounter with the Flying Dutchman. And what leads people to believe that this was the Flying Dutchman, the ghost ship that the legend says is doomed to sail the seas forever, was that her appearance is always seen as a bad omen. And apparently, a few hours later after the sighting, at 10:15 a.m, the crewman who first spotted this ghost ship fell off the rigging and died. And this was all recorded in the prince's journal, so for that encounter to have been written in his journal, and with so many other witnesses all seeing something a bit weird, that does seem strange, right? But regardless of how you feel about that, we're about to get stranger. Because apparently it's not just ghosts that the royal family have had an interest in over the years. Oh no, we're getting into UFO territory now. Or UAP, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon. I think that's the term that the kids these days are using. A lot of this particular information comes from a fairly recent documentary called The King of UFOs, so just bear that in mind. I cross-referenced where I could. But to start, we're going to go back again to the Victorian era. Those Victorians, they just got up to a lot. Apparently, at one point, Prince Albert claimed to see strange, super bright, almost dazzling lights in the night sky. He said they were just like orbs flying around, but he couldn't describe much more than that. However, his experience was so profound that he was said to have made a note of the encounter in his journal in the 1870s. And when I first saw this, I really wanted it to be true. I mean, like, that would be such a cool thing, right? Evidence of our royals from way back in the Victorian times seeing unexplained lights in the sky? Incredible. Obviously, I could not find this journal that the documentary was referencing, and the historians among you will already know why. To be fair, if you've been listening to what I've told you so far, you should already know why, because I've already mentioned the glaring error there. It is impossible for Prince Albert to have seen those lights in the sky and then wrote about it in his journal in the 1870s, because Prince Albert died in 1861. So unless those seances that Queen Victoria were attending were really that good, or without any solid proof that these really were Prince Albert's journals and maybe the dates are just a little bit wrong or something, it makes it hard to trust this source, which is a shame because some of the claims in the documentary were just wild. So I will still talk about them, but I would just say grab your pinch of salt for the rest of the episode. And if you know of these Prince Albert journals or where he saw these lights in the sky, then please do let me know. I would love to look into it a little bit more. But aside from Prince Albert, who may or may not have actually witnessed something a bit strange in the sky, Lord Louis Mountbatten, so Prince Philip's uncle, he was convinced that UFOs were real and played an important part in trying to get UFOs taken more seriously in the UK. Not that he was public about this, he apparently kept all of this work secret, and that's the reason why it was only after his death in 1979, which, absolutely horrific by the way, he died along with 3 others, including his 14-year-old grandson, when the IRA bombed his boat in Ireland on a family fishing trip. But that was when it all came to light that he had been interested in UFOs, and had put his name to a report written in 1955 that alleged that a UFO had landed on his Broadlands estate in Hampshire. Lord Mountbatten wasn't there personally, but one of his employees, a bricklayer and labourer called Fred Briggs, apparently saw the whole thing. Well, more than just saw it. Briggs said that when the silver craft had landed, a long ladder extended downwards out of it, and a figure wearing dark overalls and a helmet had appeared out of it. Briggs went on to say that there was this beam of light which was directed at him coming from the craft, although it wasn't dazzling or anything, but there was something about it that knocked him off his bike, and he felt like he couldn't move. Like he was just frozen in place because of this light. And then almost in an instant, the whole scene had disappeared, the figure, the spacecraft, the beam of light, all gone. And that's not just a documentary documentary claim. I've seen sources talk about the report before the documentary, and the Broadlands Archives have released screenshots of the actual report. And maybe it was because of his uncle's fascination, but Prince Philip himself, he was said to have been very curious about UFOs and extraterrestrial life. He was even apparently a secret subscriber to publications like the Flying Saucer Review. Had to be secret though, couldn't just have "for the attention of the Duke of Edinburgh, Buckingham Palace" right there on the address. But Philip was so deep into ufology that he was apparently actually due to meet a real extraterrestrial who had requested to meet him. Philip's equerry, Sir Peter Horsley, so like a high-ranking officer who assists him, he had been given permission to look into UFOs, obviously on the down low, but you know, see what you can see about these aliens, what you can dig up, and dig up he did. The entity's name was Janus, and he wanted to speak with Philip about how humans were destroying the Earth. The meeting never actually went ahead though, but Sir Peter Horsley outlined the entire conversation with this Janus character in his autobiography, Sounds from Another Room, where he doesn't sound entirely convinced about who Janus actually was, although some people think he was just a weirdo or maybe even a Russian spy. But even the late Queen herself, Queen Elizabeth II, she also had her own interests in this side of things as well. She was said to be very interested in crop circles, with a documentary claiming that she once sent her chief scientific advisor out to investigate a crop circle that had only just cropped up. Sorry, couldn't resist. And allegedly, that interest has potentially been passed down the family to King Charles, who, if the documentary is to be believed, may have had the wildest experience of them all, albeit a little less extraterrestrial, but still super secret and a little bit weird all the same. The documentary alleges that in the 70s, the then Prince Charles was spotted piloting a craft that flew over a small coastal town called Sandy Point in Nova Scotia, Canada. And while there was this blue flame coming out of the craft, there wasn't any sound of an engine or anything like that. It all sounded a bit eerie. And if true, for the future King of England to be allowed to go off and do that, I would suspect it's probably a prototype made by humans rather than an alien spacecraft they found crashed in the desert or something. But it is still very interesting that later on after this, there was a dive team that were down on a salvage mission for a wooden shipwreck in the area. When the divers came across a definitely not wooden structure right next to the wreck, it was a USO, so unidentified submerged object, not UFOs, not flying. It was metal and apparently had inscriptions all over it that did not look like anything earthly. Before the dive team could get a closer look though, they seemed to have been sort of like temporarily stunned, where all of them more or less corroborated that a tall figure communicated telepathically with them, saying in no uncertain terms that they shouldn't be there and that what they're looking at is not for human eyes. What's weirder is that when all of these divers all collected themselves, because they're still underwater at this point, and then they surfaced, they were surrounded by Navy guys and official-looking suits from government agencies that they'd never heard of before. And then the whole thing was just all very hush-hush for a long time, a lot of redacted reports and things like that. So it makes you think that maybe there is something going on over there. Maybe the prototype that Charles was allegedly seen flying was based on the technology of the submerged craft? Maybe, who knows? But whether you believe that the King of England has flown a prototype around the area that may contain an alien spacecraft, or you think that the whole thing is a little bit far-fetched, you can't deny that it is still interesting to talk about, right? To ponder the existence of other life forms outside of our current understanding of our place in the universe. I mean, look at all of us now, right? We're all here, you're listening to me talk about ghosts, UFOs, curses, things we don't really truly understand, and that a lot of people don't even believe to be real at all. So if all of us are interested in it, in contacting loved ones who have passed away, in hearing about ghost stories from old buildings, in discovering rumours of UFO sightings, why wouldn't at least some of the members of the royal family also share an interest like that too? But as always, first and foremost, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions. What do you think about the royal family's supposed interest in all things paranormal? Maybe we should invite the king out for a paranormal investigation. See if he can rile up some royal entities in Hampton Court Palace or the Tower of London or something. Now that would be cool. But I mean, I guess there's two sides to this, isn't there? As for the séances, things like that, it makes sense to me. While the country loses a monarch, or in Queen Victoria's case, a prince consort, the family loses a loved one, a husband, a father, a brother, an uncle. And so So regardless of being a royal, the family is gonna grieve for their loved one, and people grieve differently. Some, as in the case of the deaths of Prince Albert and King George VI, they'll try to contact them from beyond the grave to know that they're okay. My personal thoughts on seances and then mediums and things like that, I'm a bit like how I feel about Ouija boards. I don't know if they're the real deal. I think they can be very easily faked, and there are a lot of mediums out there that capitalize on this, which is always going to make you look critically at what they are saying. But I feel like regardless of whether they are real or not, if they can provide you with the comfort during that horrendous time when you're grieving, then I'm not going to knock that. They can be hugely detrimental to the point where it is completely immoral and unethical. Like, you hear about these mediums that give out inaccurate information in missing persons cases and murder investigations and things like that. But just speaking from personal experience, mediums have helped me to grieve in the past. I am a curious little soul, and in the depths of my grief, I reached out to one, and the things that they told me, I can hand on heart say that they helped me deal with those emotions. Do I 100% trust that they're real? No. Do I even trust that the medium I reached out to was real? No, I don't. Still don't completely trust that they didn't just make assumptions that just so happened to be correct. But regardless of that, it still helped me. So I know a lot of people will think that all mediums are charlatans and all seances are just faked, and that is totally cool. I'm not here to convince you either way. But what I'm trying to say is that I totally understand that act of using seances to find answers from people who have passed away. But then moving on to the UFO or UAP stuff, I'm still holding on to fistfuls of salt with that. I am a little bit harder to convince with aliens anyway. I find ghosts a little bit easier to comprehend. But it is all just a bit of fun anyway, taking leave of the super dense history that we sometimes get into on this channel. It's just a bit of an unusual topic that I came across that turned out to be bigger than I thought it was going to be. So hopefully you had just as much fun hearing about it as I did putting it together. And we didn't even get into the conspiracy theory that the royal family are actually just our reptilian overlords, and that's why they're so interested in UFOs. But I'll leave you to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole on that one in your own time. But if you enjoyed this story, something a little bit different, then please do let me know by giving it a little like. And we will be back into the full-on history and ghost stories next time. I am really looking forward to bringing you the next one. And it is not at all being influenced by the fact that anytime I am not either working or at the gym, I am playing my third playthrough of Red Dead Redemption 2. 100% completion, that Best in the West trophy is mine this time around. But if you are intrigued and you want to know what I could possibly be covering next, then make sure you're subscribed. It also does mean the world to me. But anyway, that is all from me today. Go and get a drink of water. Stay hydrated, please. I cannot wait to chat with you more about the morbid, mysterious and macabre. So until next time, sleep safe.